Good evening, everyone. I pardon my voice. It's been a long week and I'm finally on my last client. So here I am. It's a little raggedy, but excited to see everyone. Happy to have Christine here. Christine, welcome. We're super excited to hear your presentation this evening. And let's go ahead and get started so that we can roll into our presentation, which is what you guys are all here for. So this is our sort of the little blurb that we read to you every time. So just it's our disclaimer for Chad because we are here as a support group. We're not here to diagnose or to give you any kind of specific treatment recommendations or services that we endorse. So all of this is here for you to learn about, to go into your own research and on your own make decisions if this is something along with your treatment team that you want to pursue. So just please be aware that this is all here for learning and sharing and support, but we cannot and do not endorse any specific programs or treatment plans. All right, and we love attendance. Who doesn't love attendance? So if you could take a second and use this lovely QR code, and Beth is going to go ahead and pop the link in there for those of us who have a hard time with getting that QR code to work. And this is actually a really important part for us, believe it or not. So if you could just take the 30 seconds, it would mean a lot. This is sort of us proving our worth to nationals. It's showing that we're an active chapter, that we have people that are actively participating, and they use that when they decide some larger decisions about funding, other ways that they're going to be utilizing our chapter. So it means a lot to us, that 30 seconds. If you could, just let us know. And I think there's the bonus, if I'm right, Beth, of being able to select if there are things that you want to learn more about. So it helps guide where we're going too. So you get to participate in that decision process. So thank you in advance for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, and I'll put the link in once Christine starts presenting so that I can stop sharing and fumble around with the keys and um, just it'll be there in a bit. So tonight we have Christine Kotik, and it's when I saw that she was on the speaker circuit, I got really excited to find out that she was open and available to speak with Seattle Chad because she speaks nationally. She is I get to work with her on Chad's chapter advisory board. I've been working with her for about a year now. Incredibly just practical strategies, practical tools, and the feedback that she gets from the attendees to the speaking that she goes to, just really people say it works. So it's August. We're just getting through or starting the last several weeks of summer. And it might be kind of an crazy time to start thinking about money, but I did a little research and it turns out that while we're off doing something relaxing, this stuff will be percolating in our head so that when we hit the ground in September, it'll be there when we need it. So um, I think yep. I'll turn it back over to Jessica. She'll run through your Seattle Chad group leadership, and then I think we're ready to go.
Okay, so this is Seal Chat. I'd love to see more than just our two faces up there, Beth. That's kind of nice, isn't it? It feels like for a
Yeah.
long time it was just the two of us. So I'm Jessica. I am our co-coordinator for Seattle Chat, and Beth is our lovely founder. You probably are familiar with both of us at this point, and if not, we have lots of good information up here. We're also joined by Renee Crook, who is our adult support group lead, and we have Evan Nadev, who is our wonderful behind the scenes solve of all of our technical problems person, which is great. You might not see him, but he's always there, we promise, which is what we appreciate about Evan. And then Denisa is our person who is in charge of all of our in-person events. So if you're looking to join any of those, she's great. And we're often down in South Lake Union. I have Still Media Art Marble, I think, a lot of the time.
Well, it gets really warm in there in the summertime. So in August, we're going to be meeting across the street in the South Lake Union Park where it's kind of grassy, and there'll be more information on that. And if you are not in driving distance to South Lake Union, downtown Seattle, and would like to have support groups in your neighborhood, let us know. And we can help get a neighborhood hub started so that you can have something closer to home.
I think what we're saying is if you would love to volunteer to host another location for people to meet, we would love to have you. Is that right,
Okay.
Beth? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, very clear.
And then we have Evan Moniz, who I think she's moved recently, but has been was here for us for our adults support group as well, and she was a lovely addition.
All right. I think with that, I'm going to stop the share. And I did have one extra thing to add. Anybody that is interested in getting a Discord community link to join our Discord channel, I'll pop that link into the chat as well. And if anybody has questions, I've started Seattle Chat office hours during our Seattle Chat body doubling. You'll get the details of that in the Discord channel under body doubling. So. All right, with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn it over to the lovely Christine Kotik, and off we go. Oh,
Awesome.
one more thing. If everyone could just put your questions in the chat, it'll help you remember them. One of the co-hosts, Jessica, Renee, Christine, or myself will acknowledge them. And then when Christine's ready to take a break for questions, then they'll be there. We're going to ask that people hold off on raising their hands until Christine asks for that, just so that it doesn't interrupt the flow. All right, here we go.
All right. I will remember to I'll remember to take stop. And we have like 3 hours, right, Beth?
Yeah, 3. So I forgot to mention to people, Christine is visiting us from Eastern time zone tonight. So I don't know if anybody's done time zone math lately, but it is 10:13 right now where Christine is. Um, so grateful that you were willing to, come here in your beautiful, lovely magenta pajamas.
Yeah. I wish I had this nice of pajamas. Usually it's a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. So I am really excited to be here talking with all of you today. Like Beth said, I am coming to you from Columbus, Ohio. So it is, what, 10:15 here now. So hopefully we'll get through this without my brain taking an early nap in the middle of this. But Beth, we do have like go till about 8:30.
Yeah.
Is that right?
We go to 8:30 and we try to leave about at least 15-20 minutes at the end for questions if we can.
That's
We're
what I
usually
thought.
not inundated, but just a little bit would be
Yeah,
great.
no, that's great. So got about an hour. I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure I had that right. So
You
I'm
want us to give you a reminder of when we're getting close to time? Would that be
Yeah,
helpful?
that'd be great. Yeah, if
Okay,
I'm still talking, I get very excited about this. I love this topic and I love presenting to Chad groups. So yeah, if
perfect.
I'm still going strong, definitely butt
How
in
great
and
to have money be your special interest.
yeah, well, there's good reasons for that, right? So, and I'm guessing that some of you picked tonight to come because over some time in the past year that you maybe have had some challenges with your finances and your money. And if you looked around, you would find out quickly that you are not alone. So, as Beth mentioned, my name is Christine Kotik. I have ADHD. I've been involved with Chad since 2012. So for a very long time, I have a BS in accounting. That's where the kind of an understanding of the financial piece comes in. And I am an ADHD coach, and I've been an ADHD coach for 10 years. I'm also a recovering impulse buyer, income tax procrastinator, credit card collector, and ADHD taxpayer. So if any of you can feel the pain, I'm right there with you. And I could keep going about that, but we're here today to help you understand some of the challenges that our ADHD causes with finances and money management, talk about some practical strategies and how to improve your financial health. So when you leave here tonight, and as I'm heading off to bed, I want you to have figured out from this like one or two strategies that you can do right now. If not tonight, tomorrow morning, that can start to change your relationship with money. So that is a little bit of an intro, and I always got to take a minute to figure out where everything is underneath my little thing so I can move my slides. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about empowering ourselves to have financial stability and confidence. Um, we I've already kind of given my welcome. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges. I feel like this part is kind of preaching to the choir for most people, but just understanding really what are all the challenges, because you might have one or two and somebody else might have three or four, and somebody else might have the five or six, not in total number, but of the different types of challenges. Talk about some practical strategies, talk about how we can have overall financial health, right? I'm also a health and wellness coach. And one of the things I talk about all the time is the 8 dimensions of wellness and health. And one of those is our financial health. And we don't always think about how interconnected that is to everything. So a little bit at the end about financial health and what that means and looks like, and then time at the end for Q&A. So let's see here. So right now, how do you feel about money matters? So real quick in the chat, just plop in a word or 2 words of what you feel about money matters, about financial matters, about your relationship with money. I always think it's fun to see what people have to say. So kind of put those in the chat. Um, and I am going to share this with you as those are collecting, and I can't see the chat. So it's not really helpful to me at the moment. But here is, and when I've done this in the past, I've collected all the words, most of the words that people have said, and thrown them into this word diagram. I forget what this thing is actually called. But like what the things that some people feel: apathetic, I never have enough; overwhelmed. These, when these get created, these little word pictures, the ones that are the biggest are the ones that people show up the most. So like if I entered overwhelmed 10 times, that's going to be the biggest one, because that's how most people feel about it. So overwhelmed, frustrated, scared, anxious, overwhelming, ugh, nervous, worry, concerned, nerves, stressful, torturous. Means that's a pretty strong word about how people feel about money, is torturous, perfectionism, yuck. So, if you have any of these feelings, again, you're not alone. And it honestly, right, this, I'm sure that you can kind of get the picture that this isn't just related to ADHD, right? These are things that a lot of people get worried about when they think about money. But I think for those of us with ADHD, it's even bigger. I don't know why these things are over here. I don't know if you can see those, but I can't make them go away. So what are the challenges? I'm trying to see if I can get those off my screen, but I can't. Oh, there they go. Okay. So the challenges are: folks with ADHD struggle with setting goals and budgeting, creating a budget and sticking with it, setting goals, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. That's hard. There's the idea of impulsivity in spending. That's kind of like that piggyback idea, and monitoring our money. We might struggle with the impulsivity, which leads to unplanned and excessive spending on non-essential things, right? More the exciting things, the the dopamine seeking things, but not the important essential items. Struggling with organization, so organizing our bills, our statements, financial documents. And if we're not doing well at that, that can result in missed payments, missing financial information, all of that. And then focusing on our long-term goals, like saving for retirement or major purchases, can be difficult due to our ADHD's impact on our future-oriented thinking. Some of the other challenges that come up are inconsistent income management. So we can have fluctuating focus and productivity levels that might affect our job performance. And that leads to inconsistent income for some of us. If we're someone who's in a sales job and not performing consistently, that money is going to go up and down. If we're struggling to do the things at work that enable us to get raises, those can be some of the issues. So that struggling with income management, overlooking financial details. So that tendency to overlook the small things can result in big errors over time, an incorrect check amount, a failed transaction that we didn't notice it didn't go through, and now all of a sudden it's late and accumulating interest and fees. Risk-taking behaviors. That inclination towards high risk taking can manifest in financial decisions, high risk investments, gambling. I had a client that chased every like stock exciting thing that came around and put his money into that and was, just because that was the excitement for him, but it wasn't really helping his bottom line any, because they were risky investments, late payments and fees, and then challenges in prioritizing. So all the ways that ADHD shows up in our general lives, it also shows up in how we handle our finances and our money. And the research is out there to support that. A study that was published in the Journal of Attention Disorders found that adults with ADHD had significantly higher financial stress than those without ADHD. The research indicates that individuals with ADHD have higher rates of impulse buying, and that can lead to financial instability when those impulsive purchases aren't accounted for in a budget. Difficulty in maintaining employment. So studies show that, ADHD affects job stability. And when you have employment issues, it leads to inconsistent income and difficulty in managing your finances. A report from the Journal of Consumer Affairs found that individuals with ADHD tend to have lower credit scores on average compared to those without ADHD. And that's often due to difficulties in managing bill payments and credit utilization, higher rates of debt and loan defaults, and that increased likelihood of defaulting on loans further impacts credit scores and financial health. And then I think another big piece of this is the challenges with savings and retirement planning. And that's a huge piece as we get older. Have we put the money aside that allow us to be able to enjoy our final years and feel comfortable when we're struggling in our current life? How are we doing and getting ready for our future lives? And there's also research out there that shows that individuals with ADHD can have greater susceptibility to financial scams. So, that impulsivity, into thinking something sounds great and jumping into it before really investigating it, thoroughly evaluating financial decisions, picking the quick answer versus the well-researched answer. So there's a lot of things that say that having ADHD can really put a stress on your financial life. And so it's just something to keep in mind. But the good news, because that felt like gloom and doom, right? Those are all not good things. But the good news is that while ADHD can make it more difficult to manage our money, it's not impossible, right? We can do that. We just have to do it in ways that work for our brain, ways that make sense to us, and maybe is not the conventional way of doing things. We have to find those things that work for us and make sure that we're putting our attention to that. And, I think with ADHD, I talk about, and I feel like, and this is my brain, like I see everything and it all is coming in. But I know when it relates to money, I have to make sure that I take off my floodlight and put on my spotlight to the things that are important and find time to do that. Otherwise, that's when things become impossible. So it's doing things just a little differently. And I feel like this is like the most important thing is it can make it more difficult, but it's not impossible. We can all figure this out. Have faith, I do, and we will. It is workable. And so the things I'm wondering, and if you guys want to put in the chat or even take yourself off mute and just share really quick, like what are the challenges that you feel like you most struggle with? There's, the idea of long-term planning, budgeting, debt management, late payments, impulsive spending. Like, where does that show up? Oh, and I found the chat. Where does that show up for you in those areas? Like, what do you feel like is your big challenge? Long-term planning and budgeting. I see that popping in there. We'll see if anybody else puts some things. Saving and impulse buys, that long-term financial planning, right? And that really is tied into everything, right? If we can't do the short term, how do we do the long term? How do we get ready for those things? So great. And those are some of the things we're going to talk about as we go through all of this. So a quick case study, I just kind of to give an example of how I look at all this and how I approach things, and how I work with my clients as they're working with this. I had a client of mine several years ago, and she came to me one day and she's like, Christine, those social media games that are out there, and like they list like all these different things that you could have done in your life, and like, rode on an airplane, got arrested, got a tattoo, won the lottery, all these different things. And you give yourself points for each one of those. And then you compete against your friends to see who has the most points, who's done the most of these things. Or on the other end of it, if it's more negative things, who has the lowest score, that sort of thing. She said to me, I feel like if there was a money one of those and I did it, I would be the winner of like the worst ability to manage my money. She goes, I have no idea how to do that. I have no idea how to do that. And she said, I feel like money goes in and goes out. I don't know what to do. She was a 30-year-old single career woman. She had a successful job in retail. She was a manager of multiple stores and traveled all over, was well respected in her company. She had an ex partner who had taken care of all of her financial stuff for the past, like from her mid 20s to right before we started working together. And her partner, her ex partner at that time, had made her client feel bad because she couldn't manage the money stuff. So the partner took it all over. My client didn't really have anything to do with it. And then that relationship broke up. So she had a house, she had this job, she was making money, but she was spending money and she was borrowing money, and she was borrowing money from her dad. She had credit cards and she would pay one credit card with the other credit card. She's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it scares me. And part of the problem was, and I feel like this is a big piece with that can happen with the ADHD. And so think if you could relate to this, she hated talking about money. So she didn't really want to have the conversation with anybody that could help her because she just hated it. It made her anxious. She didn't want to think about the money, right? So it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind. It wasn't real, right? Because it was all happening on these credit cards and stuff was moving around. And so she was avoiding it like it was the plague. She didn't want, I mean, even bringing that up to me was a struggle for her. But the problem was by ignoring it, and she acknowledged this, it was causing so much anxiety because she knew she was ignoring it. She knew that it definitely wasn't getting better because she wasn't doing anything different to make it better. And she was constantly anxious and worried about it, but yet she didn't know where to start, and she felt like she had made such a tangle out of everything that she didn't even know, like, what's the first step, what do I do? And so we worked together for probably 6 months in like untangling her thoughts about money, her relationship with money, even for her to know what she was spending money on. So we started with having her track her spending. It was really tough for her. She'd never done that before. I grew up back, in the, what, it sounds weird, in the 1900s when I grew up, right? I had a checkbook when I got my first job, and you wrote all the little stuff down. So you kind of knew where your money was going, right? Because you were writing that down in there. Nowadays, I mean, maybe people my age write stuff down, but a lot of people don't. You can check it every day on your bank account, go into your app and see it. So it's easier to ignore because you're not doing anything, right? It's just happening. And, you're not doing that act of writing stuff down. So we had her track her spending, to go and pull back a couple months and get some of her bank statements and like, see, where is all my money going? She was amazed to find out like how much money she was actually spending going out to dinner, and not cooking, and not, grabbing something fast food and bringing it home, door dashing stuff. She's like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of money. And that never like dawned on her ahead of that time. She wrote down all the bills that she had. And so we made a spreadsheet and we wrote down all the bills and when was this due and when was that due and how much, if it was a credit card, how much was she paying and how much was still remaining on there. So she knew what was happening. So, like I said, she realized she spent a lot of money on dining out, ordering out, and the last one was throwing out, right? She's like, money, I'm throwing things away. I'm not thinking about all of this. So we figured that out. She had a good sense and it was hard, but she said, I actually feel better because I understand like where my money's going. It's not as scary when I know, and now I feel like I can do something about it. So she arranged her bank accounts so that she had money going in each paycheck that could cover her mortgage and her other fixed expenses, and the rest of the money was going into a savings account. So like it was separated. It wasn't just like, oh, look, my bank account says I have, I don't know, $4,000 today. Ooh, I think I'll sign up to go on that trip. No, okay, I have to put that money over there because it's got to pay my mortgage when it comes due in 3 weeks or whatever it is. So, like separating it. So, she had a way of keeping track of those things. She did some meal planning. So, like dealing with money wasn't just the money piece, it was actually the part of how is she taking care of herself instead of doing quick fast food and door dashing things in, which we both talked about how that wasn't really healthy for her. How could she do that differently? So we talked about meal planning. She bought an organizer that she found, right? Because we all like to find those fun things that make life a little more exciting and jazzy. She found a really cool money organizer for all her bills on Amazon, and she loved that because she could stick stuff in the pockets and it felt good. But it was good because it corralled all of her financial stuff in one place. And so over the time we worked together, it really changed her relationship with money because she lost the fear. She had a plan and she was able to work that plan. And we did it in little pieces. We didn't start right away doing all these things. We took little pieces and figured it out. And so, like I said, that was hard. It was hard getting to that point. But she would now say it was actually harder living the way she was before we took charge of things. And so when you have that, you have a plan and you're able to work on that. While it might be hard, the previous version is harder. And usually that comes to be what you realize. So that's just one person's example of going from clear mess of money, like I said, borrowing from one credit card to pay another credit card, not knowing how she spent, to being able to save for a vacation and know that she could pay for that because she knew where the money was coming in and going out and how to do all of that. And so she would easily say that managing money is not impossible when you have a plan and a way to do it that works for you. So, what does that look like for us? Let me stop a minute because I know part of my ADHD, I love to talk and I love to just get going and talk fast. I want to stop a minute. I don't know because I can't, when I'm presenting, I don't see the thing. I don't know if there have been any questions, if people have, or you have any questions right now that we can pop in. But yeah, let's take a second here. I'll take a breath. I'm going to take a drink. And if anyone has questions, we can jump into that really quick.
We tend to try to save questions to the end, but if you want us
Okay.
to look through some, just because it helps
Nope,
with the
that's
flow.
perfect.
Okay.
Okay. That's fine. Yep. Nope. Different groups do different ways. And a lot of times people like to break it up. So that's fine. I'll just keep talking. Um, and that will actually keep me awake. So that's a good thing. So, what are some strategies? So, this is like the piece, like action based strategies. And I like to, when I talk about this, like I like to present things that maybe are different ways of doing things or things people maybe don't think about. They're not the mainstream ideas, but they're just some strategies that can help as you're trying to gain an idea of what might help you with managing your money. So one of those things is use visual budgeting tools, right? So how do we keep track of our money and do all those sort of things? I always liken this. I grew up going to church, and it seemed like our church was always fundraising for something. And if the church wasn't, the elementary school was, right? So, and how we tracked that, either at church or at school, was back in the day, there'd be a big poster in the hallway, and it would look like a thermometer. And, as money came in, we'd fill up that thermometer by coloring it in red or whatever color to show how much we were doing. Like those same kind of things are helpful in our personal finances. If you're trying to save money, make it visual so you can see, oh, look, I'm getting closer to that goal. Having budgeting tools that you can use, there's apps out there that will do some of this for you and help you see those things. And I love it. My bank now even has part of their thing. Like I can click on something in my banking app that's just part of what I get to bank at my bank. And it gives me like, here's where your spending is. And it tells me, oh, it looks like you're spending, $100 more on groceries this month. And I don't have to do anything to get that. And so those little things that are out there can be really helpful as you're trying to keep track of your money and your spending. Um, Set up automatic payments, right? And I feel like this is like sometimes people are afraid to do that, but you can set it up through your bank where your bank pays the bills for you, or you can set it up online if you're comfortable. That is like for me in my personal life, that was the biggest game changer when I realized I didn't have to like write a check and get it in the mail and get it to wherever it needed to be on time, or that I didn't need to go into someone's website and pay something. My electric bill, they take it out all the time. It's paid. I don't have to think about it. So having that stuff that happens automatically helps us manage our executive functions in a big way. So setting those up can be great. I love it. Our utility bill here, you can even do like a budget plan where they'll average out your like 12 months of my utility bills. And so they'll like take that out, the average out. So I don't have, we have a swimming pool, we run our air conditioner in the summer, all that stuff. And so our summer bills are huge, whereas our winter bills are small. So it'll average all that out. So I'm not even having to worry about inconsistent expenses. It's pretty consistent. And then like twice during the year, they kind of do a catch up. But it's a great way of doing things. So using those things that are out there, and available to us now, I think is huge. Simplify your financial accounts. I have had people that are like, have a bunch of credit cards, a bunch of this, a bunch of that. That makes it harder. It's more to keep track of, right? It's more coming into us. So streamlining those things, having one credit card, if you can do that, that you use for everything instead of picking up all the store credit cards that then you have to remember to pay those and do that. If you could simplify that, it's way easier than having crazy convoluted systems, because generally simpler can be easier. So thinking about ways to do that, having regular financial check-ins, right? That can be a big piece that's hard, sometimes for folks with ADHD if we're uncomfortable about money or we're worried about money. But like spending time regularly checking in, like set up a time. And I forgot to mention at the end of this, like I have I don't know, a whole like little workbooky thing that I put together as I've done these presentations. And you can get that, and be able to download that. But one of the things in there, it talks about like, how do you have a daily check in. What are the 5 things you need to check every day with your finances? What's a weekly plan look like? A monthly check-in. What should you be checking? Are you checking to make sure that all your bills got paid for that month? That if you're doing the automatic stuff, did something, did everything go through all right? Are you budgeting? Are you falling in where you need to be? Are you doing the things? Do you have money left over that you can allocate for something else instead of just, having it slip through your fingers? So having those regular financial check-ins can be really huge. Um, Create an impulse spending plan, right? And I saw someone at the beginning said that was one of their challenges. I think, for especially now, when, before, to go an impulse spend, like, you had to like drive yourself to Best Buy or Target or Walmart or wherever you do your shopping to buy something. Now, right, it's coming to you in your Facebook feed and in your, in your emails, all those things. So having a plan, like, how do you manage yourself around impulse spending? For me, I love to go on Amazon and, like, I'm like, oh, that's a cool thing. Oh, look at that. Oh, I love that outfit, whatever it is. But, like, I know I can't just go. I mean, I would love to be able to just go and buy all those things, but I know I can't, nor do I need all that stuff coming to my house. So my part of my impulse spending plan, I just put it, either save it or I put it in my cart, and it has to sit there for a while. And then usually when I'm ready, I'm like, why is that in there? I don't need that. And I take it out. So, like, having that, like, a, like a cooling off period, I think, is super helpful. I always use the example, my son, when he was growing up, went through a phase of, he liked these little things called bakugans. They were these little round balls, and they popped open and you play games with them and all this stuff. But they'd come out with new ones, and he always wanted a new one, and he wanted to go to the store. And so we were like, no, like, we have to have a plan for this. Or, when he wanted a guinea pig, like, no, we're not going to just go out and buy a guinea pig because you've decided that. Like, we had like a time, like, you have to wait for 10 days before we will do that, because usually 10 days later he was done with the guinea pig and was on to something else. So having an impulse spending plan. And I think another fun thing is, I've had people, like, have a don't buy plan. Like, okay, I am not buying any clothes this month. That's my list. That I have, that's part of my spending plan. No clothes this month, or no, whatever it is. But so, kind of making that for yourself, so that you're not just getting excited at the shiny things and the fun things, but they're not really part of your strategic plan to manage your finances long term. So, to be able to think about this, something else that I think is helpful with this impulse spending is, if you do this, think about it. Don't save your credit card information in the online shopping stores, right? I mean, there's always the concern about safety of that anyway, but it's a lot harder if you have to, like, get up, go to your wallet, get that out, type in all those numbers, do the, thing to order it, versus if it's already in there and you just, like, click, 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 and now you've ordered it, and the Amazon guy is going to show up at your house the next day with all the boxes that you ordered. But it gives you that pause, that chance to take a moment and think, is this really something I need, or is it just a want? Does it fit? Am I going to feel the same way tomorrow? But if you don't have your card information in there, it gives a little bit of a separation before you just click buy. Um, and I think it helps with this. And I don't know where this fits in here, but I'll pop it in now. But, like, having a dedicated card for recurring bills. So, like, if you're someone that has credit cards and you like to do that, sometimes it can be really helpful if you put all of those on one card, right? And then you're getting the points or whatever, because I have people that love to get their, extra points and that sort of thing. But if you do that and you use a card for that, then it, then you're just paying that one thing each month. And for some people, that's a big help. It wouldn't be for me, but for other people, that can be help. It's makes it easier to track. It prevents forgetting things from accumulating. So you put it all on one card, and then you pay that card as it comes due. Um, and then I think another thing that can be helpful is, if you do have different credit cards and you're struggling with getting them all paid, is to look at that as a plan and think about how can you align those. So some people like to have them all paid on one date because it just happens at once and they can manage their budgeting. Other people like to spread it out and say this card this month, this card, but oftentimes you can call a card company, call a bill, a recurring bill, and ask to have your payment date changed. And so line that up. If you're always getting that, right at the end of the month when you feel like you're out of money, move it. Ask, can they switch it and do it in the middle of the month? And they're usually, because the way things are set up now, able to do that. Something else that can be really helpful is to use cash for your daily expenses. I find for myself, it's really easy. And I know, like, I work with a lot of college students. It's super easy to just, you've got your debit card or a credit card, whatever you're using, and just you pay for stuff and then it's just gone. But if you say, okay, I have $30 this week that I can use to spend on, grabbing a pop or a soda as I'm out running errands or picking up Starbucks or one of those things. When the cash is gone, then you can't spend anymore. But if you're using a card, whether it's coming out of your bank account or going onto a charge, it's easy to let that grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And so sometimes having that, like having cash, can help with that, because one, it makes it real. You're handing it over to somebody, you see it getting smaller and that sort of thing. So sometimes that can be super helpful. My mother-in-law to this day does the whole cash envelope budgeting strategy. And when her money comes in, she takes it and puts so much is for the electric bill, so much, and she puts it all in the envelopes. I don't even know what all her envelopes are, but she has them all in envelopes. And that's how she does that. And then she knows that whatever's left in her bank account, that's the extra money. And so she can let that grow versus just spending it and not knowing where it is. So I think that can be helpful. Let's see here. Break down your financial goals. We'll talk about this a little more, but I think that's one of the things. How do we plan for longer term? We have to have some goals. So how do we break those down and make them make sense? One of the things I was talking about was like having a financial, we all talk about our to-do list, but what's your financial to-don't list, right? So think in your head about those things that you want to identify and list them out, write them down somewhere, put them on a, 10 most wanted type list. They're things you're going to avoid, such as, using your emergency fund for everyday expenses, right? If you're building up an emergency fund, like that has to be the rule. And telling yourself and reminding yourself what those rules are is really helpful, of things you don't want to do. Because if you identify them and you put them out there, it's a lot harder to break the rules than if it's just in your head and you're like, oh yeah, I know I shouldn't do that, but oh no, look, it's on my don't do this list. So that can be helpful. Using reminders and alerts, putting those in your phone, putting them on a calendar. If you know you have something coming due, if you know you want to spend time every Sunday looking through your spending for the past week and thinking about the spending for the upcoming week, put a reminder, make that real for yourself, make it a date. I always say date yourself. Put it in your planner, put it in your calendar that this is my half hour on Sundays to spend time thinking about my money management, my money strategies. Because, I know for me, if I don't do that and I just say I want to do it, it's not really real in my brain. Like it's just some fake thing that I'd like to do, right? It's ideal, but when it's there on my calendar and when it's there as a specific item, I'm much more likely to do it. So I'll set a reminder, I'll set an alert to go off for those kind of things. Um, Minimize your financial risks. That's building up an emergency fund, starting to think of how you can build out your future financial planning and savings and that sort of thing. So minimizing those risks, getting things paid on time so you don't have the late fees, all those ADHD tax kind of things that we tend to get stuck with. And then seek professional advice, right? Managing money is not for the faint of heart. And banks, like I have found, and I have had clients that have gone in, there are people in your bank that will sit with you and help you figure those things out if you let them know that that's something that you would like that's part of their job, that's part of their role, the banker's role. So use those people. Set up a lot of times I'll get things, set up a meeting with a financial planner, even if you're not sure that you have any finances to plan with, right? But talk with them about it, because the more we get used to talking about our money and talking about how this is working for us, the better it is. Talk with an accountant. If you own a business, talk with a bookkeeper that can help you manage all of these things, because that makes it easier. And if it's not your strong suit, like that's okay. It doesn't have to be. So finding that help is really big. Um, and I think that knowing that with our ADHD brains, there are going to be mistakes that happen. There's going to be time where you blow. I had a client and he called and he was so upset. He'd been saving money for this semester at college. He was so upset. I don't know, a new game came out. I'm not a gaming person, but a new game had come out and he went and bought it. And so he felt really bad and he's like, I've been trying so hard. And I'm like, you know what? It's not it's okay. Like it's not the end of the world. If that's something you really wanted and you bought it, accept that, enjoy your game, and then think of, okay, now what do I do? How can I make up that money? How can I make the changes? But mistakes are going to happen. We're going to do things that we didn't intend or forget to do things we should have. And don't berate yourself. Just know that, okay, what do I do different next time? How can I use that as a learning experience? And that, keeping striving for those things, doing small things, um, and consistent small things over time build up. If you look at just even saving money, like not going to Starbucks one day less, or going to Starbucks one day less every month, that adds up over time, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but it does. And once you've done that one day less one month, maybe you can do it 2 days less the next month. And so it's finding all those little ways and those little changes, and you start adding them up, and over time you have big changes, and that's what feels good. And those little changes also start to make us feel good, right? And it's getting that little bit of excitement, that little boost, and thinking, okay, I did that. What can I do next? And so it's looking at the small things and knowing that it doesn't have to be this big thing to get going. Um, and I tell people things even as much as making smart financial choices. So, when I talk about food planning with people and, how to do that sort of thing, sometimes what happens is we want to save money at the grocery store. So we go and we buy, a big thing is, buy the celery, vegetables. People always tell me about all the rotting vegetables that are in the refrigerator, right? So they are buying stuff. They don't take the time to chop it up and cut it up, and they're busy. Well, I found in our grocery stores now, you can get already not the little mini carrots, because those always seem to be slimy to me, but they're regular carrots that someone's already chopped up and they've put them in a little container. And you can buy celery that's already chopped up in a little, not chopped up, but made so you can dip it and eat it. Celery that's like that, you can buy. They do have chopped onions. You might pay a little more for that. But what I find is that's the stuff that actually gets eaten in my house. So, I would rather spend a little more for that extravagance of actually having food that I don't have to take the time to deal with it, and I'm going to eat it and my kids are going to eat it, kind of thing. So, making those kind of smart decisions, spending money on things that, oh, I'm going to do all this, and then we don't. It's being realistic and thinking, I know I know that celery is going to be in there, and I'm going to go in next week and it's going to be flopped over, and no one wants to eat flopped over celery. But if I buy it already chopped up and in a little thing of water, it's gone. It's gone quickly. And so like I feel good about that. So knowing where it's okay to like do that little bit of extra, because it's actually you're going to get more out of it than if it's just rotting in your drawer. So thinking about that, let's see. Something else that people find really helpful when they're thinking about money is using body doubling. I have had a group of clients for a while that were struggling with that. And so they got together and had, as they were getting ready for tax season, they had a tax organizing party. And they all brought all these, I didn't go, but there were three of them. They brought like tubs full of all their stuff, and they just sat together, talked, and sorted out all their things. And it was great. Like they were like, this was the best thing ever. I had another client that when it was tax time, she would go and take all their paperwork and all their stuff and would go to a hotel room and spend 2 nights, Friday night and Saturday night, and get all of the tax stuff done. She said it saved her husband and her from arguing and fighting about it. She didn't have to worry about the kids bugging her and it taking forever. Like in one weekend, all the stuff was pulled together that they could, I don't know whether they did them or gave them to the accountant or whatever, but like so that was a good investment of her money to actually get something done all at once. So it's thinking about things like it's how do we think about it a little differently of what's going to work for us. It doesn't have to be what everybody else does. It doesn't have to be what makes sense for everybody. It has to be what makes sense for us and that we can do it to get our stuff done. So I think those are big things. Let's see here, watching the time. So good, strong ideas of managing your money is to make a budget. Very hard for people to do. So what is a good budget look like? It's taking your, and we are on top of us. Here we go. So it's taking your needs. So your needs should take up no more or take up like 50% of your income, say, and that of your expenses are your needs. Your wants, those are just the things you want. Like I need to have a winter coat. I want to have a winter coat and a jacket and a ski jacket and all the right, but I need that. So like being able to separate your wants from your needs and then putting 20% if you can into savings or paying off your debt. So like managing, like we all have to have our wants. So there has to be things that are there to make us feel good and feel rewarded for earning money, for saving money, for spending on the things we need. So I think that's important, but it has to kind of all be managed in there. And so thinking about like what are your bills that are your needs? And sometimes those get confusing. Like utility bills, those are a need. Cell phone bills, in this day and age, like since we don't have home phones anymore, most of us, like that's a need, but there's part of that that could be a want, right? We don't have to have the newest, most upgraded, biggest plan. We can pare that down a little bit. So, kind of judging what's the need and what's the want. And then taking a look at this and being able um, to revisit this at times because sometimes this changes. Like right now in our expenses, one of our needs is we have college tuition coming up in the next 3 months. So that's a need. That's going to change what I have available for our wants. Right. And so looking at that and knowing that can be really helpful. So I like to tell people to think about budgeting, which a lot of people are like, oh, I hate to budget, but really think about it in a way as self-care, right? Because if we budget things and we have money for our needs and we're saving or paying down debt, then that actually helps us identify what's available for our wants. Like, and we can then decide how to prioritize the wants. We can't really the needs we need. We can't prioritize those, right? As long as we have enough money to pay for the needs, but we can prioritize the wants. And so maybe a want becomes I would love to be able to go and for part of what I need, I would love to go get a massage. But if I manage my needs and I'm saving, I can know whether I have the money to pay for that in a month as a want. So if we're looking at things, we know that. So thinking about that, looking at those idea of fixed and variable, right? So fixed expenses are those ones you have every month, boom, 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 boom. But there's variable expenses that can pop up and kind of derail us. Like here in Ohio, one of those things is property tax. Um, you know, I've turned that into a fixed expense and I put money aside each month for that. My mom has never done that. So every time, twice a year, January and July or June, whenever, January and July, when those are due, like she has a big payment for her property tax that's due. So, like, that's variable. And if she doesn't plan for that, then that's a problem because how does she have that money? So I find that like if we can kind of think of things, fix them, like I said, being able to have like my utility payments kind of be fixed and it's the same every month is super helpful. But knowing what those are and knowing when you have, variable for us is college tuition. It happens for 3 months right now, and then it happens for 3 months in January, February, and March. So being able to be ready for those helps me budget what I need to do in those months compared to the other months. A vacation might change that. So knowing those things. But if you can allocate your income into something like this and have a plan for it, it people are like, oh, I hate, having to think about my money that way, but it can be very freeing. And like I said, be an act of self-care to know what's going out, what's coming in and what's going out, and then what you have left over to either save or to spend on things that are the wants. So looking at those things I think are super
Christine,
important.
before you move on, can you go lean? You're blocking the slides on the bullets with your
Oh.
beautiful face. So if you could just lean for a second so we can read the other ones.
Yeah, I don't see me like you guys are.
Okay, awesome. I was just trying to see what the last bullets were.
Sorry, yeah, that's funny.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish I would show up on my screen like I must be showing up on yours. I didn't know I was blocking. All right, so there we go. Um, and then so savings, right? So that was like the expense side of things, but the savings side, and this is what's hard for people. So how do you do that? Creating an emergency fund is super important. Those things that pop up, your roof needs fixed, your tire blows out. So being able to put in a little bit each month that can go into that. And I tell people, like, you don't have to think, oh, an emergency fund, I have to put $100 in there every paycheck. I'm like, what if you just put $10 in, right? Eventually it's going to save up and every little bit is going to help. So I love there's banking apps that will help you do this. You can set it up at your bank, but move it out of your checking account, like actually create a new savings account to put that in. So it's not, so it's out of, this is what you want to be, out of sight, out of mind, right? You want it to be there growing, not something that you easily get commingled in with your other account information. So I think that's one thing, is to think about how you can start an emergency fund. And it doesn't have to be like, don't make it, if you don't have the funds or you're not sure how to do it in a big way, do it in a small way. $10 every week, that's nice at the end, and you can keep growing that until you have more. Goal-oriented savings. I am old enough to remember when banks used to offer something called a Christmas Club fund, and that was where they would take money out of your checking account, a certain amount every month, or I don't know what the cadence was, but they would take it out and they would put it in your Christmas Club account, and you couldn't get that money out until like December. And so it was a forced savings. And so like like saving for a vacation, instead of waiting and charging all the things and then having to pay that off, switch it around, like switch that order around, save the money up over the year, and then you have the money to go on vacation without charging things and going into debt for it that is harder then to pay off. So setting that kind of thing up, goal-oriented savings. It's like a college fund, it's your emergency fund, a Christmas fund. I have clients, I have friends. That's how they do Christmas. They just put so much into a savings account that's what it's for. And then when the time comes, it's there. And that can be really huge. I have one client that has a clothing fund. She really likes her clothes. So it doesn't feel as guilty to her when she knows that, okay, if I have extra money in our checking account after this pay period, I'll move some of that over into my clothing fund. And so then when she wants to buy her clothes, she's buying it with already money that exists, not charging and going into debt, that sort of thing. So that's great. And if you can do automated savings, that's even better. A lot of times you can do that right through your employer. Is they can put, you know, X amount of dollars to your checking account, X amount to your savings account. And you're able to do that, or your bank can do it, or you can automatically move it. So I think that's super helpful because, like I said, out of sight, out of mind. I had a client tell me, and I've got to get back in touch with her to find out what this app is because I keep forgetting. But she has an app that, like, it's a banking app that she can set up all these different multiple savings accounts. So, like, little funds within her checking account. So it's not just right there growing and looking like she could just spend it. It's moved aside and separated out. And for her, that's great because that way she's is able to save money for all these various things. And it's allowed her to cut down on her credit card spending. So I think that, you know, finding things like that that are available to you can be good. I think, I'm just making sure I get through my notes here. Okay. So yeah, and then tracking your spending habits, like, right? So this is the opposite of saving, but it's easier to save when you know when you can do that budgeting piece and you know what you have to spend, what you want to save, and what you can spend. So when you track those spending habits, it's really helpful. And there's apps out there. You could create I know my bank, again, you can download things into a Excel spreadsheet and, you know, move stuff around and categorize it. But don't make it difficult, but have an idea of where your spending is, because sometimes, like my like my client in that case study, you might be surprised how much of your, you know, weekly take home, monthly take home money is going to, like I said, eating out, ordering out, and throwing out. So having a good handle on that can be super helpful. And then this is what I had mentioned earlier, was that having that structure for your financial health, having, you know, a daily micro check. So what are the things that you want to check each day as you're going through, and, you know, whether you do it in the morning or in the evening, you know, about your spending, doing a weekly check-in about what you're spending, what bills need to be paid, what's happening, you know, oh, the kids have an event coming up and we need to budget for that sort of thing. Having a monthly check-in and review. So overviewing the past month, looking ahead to the upcoming month, especially for those like variable expenses that maybe pop up, that you don't have all the time. You know, the beginning of the school year when you have kids, there's always a lot more expenses than there are during some of the other months. Christmas, you've got Christmas, you know, those holidays, if you've got birthday months, those kind of things, so that you're aware of them and you're thinking, where am I spending more or less? And then I think the other big thing is doing an annual review. And so, like I said, in the document, in that little workbook thing, there's a page in there of like, what goes in that annual review? What does that need to look like? But that's where, you know, spending time looking at, you know, your investing in your financial retirement accounts, your, you know, where do you stand with your credit cards, even looking at insurance, all those different things, and looking for areas where maybe you can make some changes. And then looking at what went well over the year and how you've handled your money. And then also looking at what's been a challenge and what do I need to do differently going forward. So I think those are some of the things that are important to take a look at as you go through. So, I feel like we live in a world where everyone says, "Oh my gosh, you have to do this. If you're not doing this, you're not tracking your money right. You have to use this tool. You have to do it this way." I'm a huge believer of if it's not working for you, move on from it. Just because everybody else thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread and you just need to do this, if that's not working for you, figure out what will work for you and what aligns with your goals and make those changes. There's nothing worse than trying to fit yourself in a box. My mom still writes in her checkbook and does all that. And she's like, I can't believe you don't still do that. And I'm like, Mom, that's like, that's so 1900s, right? But no, that's like how that's not how it makes sense to me anymore. I can look in my bank account every morning and see what all has cleared. I know what all's out there, and I write very little checks. And I feel like that's where in the past, what would trip people up a lot is you were writing checks, which might not clear for a while. So you forget that you've written the check. And then all of a sudden this money comes out and you're like, oh, I don't have that. But now, I mean, most of my stuff is through my debit card or through a bill pay system. And so I know what's happening a lot easier. And I can look in there and get that immediate feedback and make sure that, nobody's charging, a vacation in Tahiti to my account that I didn't get to go on. So being able to look at those things, I've adapted. I grew up doing my checkbook and writing all the stuff in the register and doing all that. For a while, we tracked our money in QuickBooks or Quicken and all of that. And, we've adapted and we're doing it a different way now. And so, find what works for you and kind of keep going. Again, I feel like this is like the important big takeaway from this is that ADHD can make it more difficult, but it's not impossible. There's small things you can do. There's small things. There is one thing that I said in here today that you might go, oh, that makes sense. And you know what? If that is just helping you manage $5 of your overall budget over the next month, that's $5 that you weren't managing before. And so I think it's, looking at those sort of things that are helpful. And then just some of the little like fun tips that I think are helpful is to look at, if you get a windfall of money, like what can you do with that different than maybe how you've done it in the past? You win $50 on a lottery scratch off. Like, oh, instead of thinking I'm going to spend this, if one of your, goals that you've set for yourself is to increase the money coming in, then how can you save that money? Or how can you use that in a more thoughtful way than just, using it on coffee? Unless coffee's your passion, and then buy the best coffee you can. But thinking about that, thinking about your tax refund, like instead of thinking, oh, that's great, we're going to go on vacation with that. If that's not the best way, maybe it makes more sense to save that money and make a more informed decision on vacation. If you get a bonus at work, how can you save that versus spending it? And there's always the talk of, when you get a raise, how can you save the raise because you've been used to not having it and then live on the rest. And I'm always like, we have to reward ourselves in some way. So it's, making sure that you save some of that raise goes into savings, and then maybe you splurge or spend a little bit, but thinking about how you can change how you think of things. A simple thing, and we did this, my family loves to read. We are voracious, crazy readers, but like when we all go to the bookstore and spend tons of money buying books that then sit on a bookshelf and then get loaned out to people or whatever, I'm like, no, you know what? We're going to see what happens if we stop that and just go to the library. I listen to books on tape. I get all of those from the library, and it saves money, right? And those books were just taking up space and then we got rid of them. So it's thinking of little things like that that don't seem like much when you just talk about them, but when you really start looking at it and looking where you're spending money, it's amazing. We have 4 kids. When they were little and we would go to a bookstore, like, that was a ton of money for books that sometimes when they were little, like over the weekend, they were done with them. We just spent, I don't know, $100 at the bookstore. So like, how could we, let's go to the library, get books we can borrow and give back and get more. So it's thinking of things like that. Things like weatherproofing your home, little things you can do to make sure you don't have air coming in and going out that shouldn't be, underneath doors, around windows, even through your outlets. Little things like that don't seem like a lot are easy ways to like decrease your utility bills, that sort of thing. And those are just, I don't know, I feel like some of the little things, the coffee, I see Jessica coming on. I'm guessing that might be my warning. But the little things like coffee and all of that, how can you make a change that allows you to put more money into your bank account than is coming out of it? And sometimes just shifting that a little bit can be helpful. So I'm going to take a drink and open it up for questions. I do have, I'll put this on here really quick. This is how, if you want to get in touch with me, if you have questions, anything, on my website, and my email address is there. And I'm sure Beth would be happy to share that with you if you don't remember. And then this is the last thing on here is it's a survey I use in my speaking to give feedback from if you found this valuable, if you found it relevant, all that sort of stuff. So you can either scan the QR code or I can put this link in the chat. It takes you to a survey. And when you finish the survey, did I save it? Oh, I didn't save it. I have to pull it back out. When you take the survey, it then gives you the link to download the workbook, which has some of the information here. It does go through like a little rubric or a checklist for the daily, weekly, monthly, annual, different things you can do. There's some income trackers in there. There's all sorts of stuff. It's like 28 pages of just stuff I've collected and thought could be helpful in some way to somebody. So with that, I will kind of be quiet and happy to answer questions.
Love it. Thank you so much, Christine. That was a fantastic presentation.